Welcome to our time and effort reporting webinar. This morning we're going to talk about some updates, and joining us today is Tiffany Boyd, and she'll be walking you through this presentation. She is our Senior Manager for Compliance, and Lindsay Anastasio has joined us this morning as well, our Assistant Controller. And Marie Baker will probably be joining us somewhere along the way, and she is our Assistant Director for Grants and Funds Management. So I'm going to pass this over to Tiffany so that she can get started.
Thank you, Joanne. I just want to do another sound check. Can everyone hear me okay?
We can hear you great.
Perfect. So we have a pretty packed agenda today. If you've seen this webinar before, we're going to go over federal law for expenses associated with sponsored awards. We're going to kind of build in compliance related to time and effort reporting so that we can get a better understanding of what effort is as it relates to reporting and the relationship between effort and salary. We're also going to talk about what a salary cap is and how to account for it properly on the effort report, just because in this last round of time and effort reporting, the question came up quite frequently, so we just wanted to address that. We're going to appreciate the consequences of effort reporting as it relates to noncompliance, and then we're going to dig right into the summary of all the updates we were able to make as a direct result of all the feedback we got from you guys from this first round using the new time and effort reporting system. And then we're going to walk you through a demo of the time and effort e-form at all approving stages, starting with the business manager releasing and reviewing it, all the way from the employee, the PI, and the supervisor approval. And then we're going to talk about where you can find resources and who you can contact if you have questions. So with that, we're going to dig right into the applicable regulations that we want you guys to be aware of. The Code of Federal Regulations, that's 2 CFR 200, commonly referred to as uniform guidance. That's the guidance that we're always referring to as it relates to making sure that we're being compliant with managing and administrating these awards. And the link to the electronic version of this regulation is provided right here. But we also want to highlight that there's also a lot of agency-specific guidance. So all of the big agencies, federal agencies, usually have their own specific guidance. So we just kind of wanted to highlight that. We're not going to go into a lot of specifics related to that. But we did just want to point out that, you know, every award is different. And so depending on the agency, they usually have very specific guidance related to theirs particular awards as well. So just making sure that you're aware of those. And then we also wanted to remind you guys that even if your award or your grants aren't federal, a lot of times those non-federal grants will place references to uniform guidance in their agreements, making them subject to the same rules. So even if your grant is a state grant, 9 times out of 10, they put terms in their agreements that make them subject to all the same rules. So now we're going to dig down into the specific sections that we just kind of wanted to highlight. Again, we're just going to do a quick overview. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this. But these are the specific areas that we just wanted to highlight. The first section is 200.302, and this is where it talks about internal controls. And basically that's just saying that uniform guidance requires us to establish and maintain effective internal control over the award to provide reasonable assurance that it's being managed in compliance with regulations. So basically, anytime there's an instance of noncompliance, they're expecting it to be identified and corrected in a timely manner, and that there to be strong internal controls in place to fix that, to identify it and fix it. So even, and we bring this up because a lot of our policies, as it relates to cost transfers that we're going to get into later, all drive on the fact that they're expecting us to have internal controls to catch it in place. So even if your cost transfer or the cost or the expense may be a valid expense, it's not the fact that it's not valid, but because the sponsor is expecting us to have internal controls to catch it timely, and we didn't, we may not be allowed to allow that charge to go to the project now because we didn't catch it in time. So just kind of keep that in mind. The next section we're going to talk about, or we just wanted to highlight, is section 306, where it talks about cost sharing and matching. And that's just saying that any shared cost or matching funds as it relates to contributions, whether it's cash or third party in-kind contributions, they must meet these 3 items. They have to be verifiable within our records, and they cannot be included as contribution on any other award. So you can't double count it. You can't count it on this project and then count it over here on this project as well. And they have to be necessary and reasonable. It can't be something random. It has to be, necessary for the scope of work. The next section is section 200.403, and this is just where they get into the details about the factors that affect allowability of those costs. So they highlight that obviously the cost must be necessary and it must be reasonable for the performance of the award, and it has to conform to any limitations or exclusions that have been set forth within the term of that notice of award. And we bolded the next point because we just wanted to make it apparent that it has to be consistent with policies and procedures that apply both uniformly to the federally financed award or the grant and activities of the non-federal entity. So for example, you can't have special rules for your grants and different rules for your non-grants. So whatever you're doing within your college or within your labs, the rules have to be the same for both, regardless of the source of funding. So if you're deciding whether or not to distribute bonuses or additional compensation, like the amount of that has to be based on university policies and procedures. You can't have a special rule or policy because, I've got a grant over here that can fund it. And the next point we wanted to highlight is, a cost can't be assigned to a federal award as a direct cost and then incurred for the same purpose and allocated to the award as an indirect cost. So for example, you'll notice that anything that's included in our IDC rate can't be then directly charged to the grant. For example, you'll notice that we can't charge electricity or water directly to grants because that's included in our IDC rate. So just be aware of those things as you're charging expenses. Section 404 goes into more detail about what's considered reasonable. So a cost is reasonable if, in its nature and amount, it does not exceed that which would be incurred by a prudent person. Again, no one likes to be swindled or overcharged for something, and the federal government is included in that. So a cost is generally recognized as ordinary necessary for the operation of the entity and performance of the award. So is it actually needed and used to complete or accomplish that scope of work? And are sound business practices being used? Are you using arm's length bargaining? Again, making sure that you're, getting multiple quotes or things of that nature, and you're not just, overpaying for something because you know this person. Market prices for comparable goods and service for the geographical area. Again, are you procuring supplies or services that are, across the country and paying freight and delivery and all that stuff when there's something, within the state that you could incur